building block of the body, and it carries instructions on what proteins, how much proteins are made, and what they do. In other words, the instructions on how the body works are carried out through small proteins. Now, when you have a defective survival motor neuron, it means that the proteins it produces are defective, okay? And the proteins are what determine how the motor neuron functions so that it can give instructions to the muscle. Good humans! Good evening! I hope I didn't lose you on my last lesson. Welcome back to Lydia Waigi's Way. My name is Lydia. If you're new to my channel, thank you very much for joining us to where we learn, we share, we grow, we connect, we hope, we grab a little bit of something in life. I am very happy to be back to continue digging deeper into spinal muscular atrophy. My son has spinal muscular atrophy. It's a rare genetic neuromuscular disease, and I am hoping to be able to shed some light on it so that somebody else might be able to have just an easier understanding, because it can be a little bit complicated. Alrighty? So, are we ready for lesson number 2? Did I lose anybody on lesson number 1? So, Phil, we're ready for good. Alrighty, welcome back. We are going to build a few more blocks onto spinal muscular atrophy. If you did not watch the prior video on what spinal muscular atrophy is, then this one might be a little difficult to break down. Now, we said spinal muscular atrophy has 2 components. It's hereditary, and that means there's a gene component to it, and it affects the muscles. And I broke it down on how it affects the muscles using the definition of itself, spinal muscular atrophy. Now, a gene is the building block of the body, and it carries instructions on what proteins, how much proteins are made, and what they do. In other words, the instructions on how the body works are carried out through small proteins, and the gene decides how much of these proteins we're going to make and where they are going to function. Are we together so far? Now, for spinal muscular atrophy, the gene that holds those instructions enter survival motor neuron 1. Okay? Survival motor neuron 1 carries instructions on how much protein is formed so that the motor neurons can work. Remember, we said that we have a problem in the spine, and the motor neuron does not have nutrition so that it can tell this muscle to work. All right? Now, this bit of nutrition is what survival motor neuron 1 is for. Survival motor neuron 1 gene makes proteins called survival motor neuron proteins. and those proteins come and give instruction, nutrition to the motor neuron so that it can communicate with the muscle. Are we together so far? So, survival motor neuron gene gives food to the neuron. Now, survival motor neuron gene, each of us has 2 copies of this gene, okay? It is very specific on how it is built, like all proteins in the body. If any of the units of the proteins are off, then we have a defective. Notice, we have a defective survival motor neuron gene. Remember? No more. Defective, okay? Now, when you have a defective survival motor neuron, it means that the proteins it produces are defective, okay? And the proteins are what determine how the motor neuron functions so that it can give instructions to the muscle. If you have a defective survival motor neuron gene, then you're going to make defective proteins, defective nutrition that does not provide nutrition to the motor neuron, which then means you have a defective muscle. The muscle does not get the memo. It don't work right, okay? Have I lost anybody so far? Now, we all have 2 copies of this gene, okay? And somewhere in the miracles of God, He created a backup copy of survival motor neuron gene. So we all have 2 of this, and then there is a backup copy that is not as effective as one is. And that one is called survival motor neuron gene 2. It's a backup copy. It's chilling in the background. It's not as effective, and so the body has put it on chill mode, and the body uses the survival motor neuron 1 gene. Okay? Now, I'm going to repeat it again. Survival motor neuron gene provides nutrition to the motor neuron so that it can tell the muscle to move. If you have a defective survival motor neuron gene, then the proteins that it produces to give nutrition to the muscle are null and void. They're not going to work, okay? And so your muscles lose function and they atrophy, okay? And that's how the genetic component of spinal muscular atrophy comes in. Have I lost you? Are we together so far? Okay, we're together so far. I'll just give it a minute. Okay, minute to sink in is done. So I'll give a quick recap of lesson number 2 on gene. Okay, hereditary bit is a genetic bit, okay? And I'll go a little bit deeper so that we can understand how the child finally gets spinal muscular atrophy. Next lesson, stay tuned, okay? So, in this lesson, we said that a gene is the basic unit of the body that carries instructions, and it gives these instructions to proteins. And it decides how much of these proteins are going to be made so that they can give instructions to parts of the body to work. Now, for the motor neuron, survival motor neuron 1 gene, which we have 2 copies each, is the one who makes proteins called survival motor neuron protein. And that protein gives nutrition to the motor neuron so that the motor neuron tells the muscle to work. It's simple. Okay? So if you have good system, survival motor neuron gene is healthy, gives instruction, forms survival motor neuron protein, who is food for motor neuron produces healthy muscle. If you have a defective survival motor neuron gene, then it produces defective survival motor neuron proteins that do not give good nutrition to the motor neurons, and the motor neurons do not communicate to the muscle. In other words, defective gene produces defective proteins, which means the motor neurons do not get the nutrition they need, and so the muscle does not get to function. It atrophies. All right? Now, I'm going to pause that lesson there. I'll look out in the comments. Let me know how we're doing so far. Let me know if things are making sense so far. And I will be back next to go a little deeper into how this defective gene that I carry ended up affecting my son, that he has spinal muscular atrophy. Okay, we will delve deeper into how I, as a parent, the father as a parent, have a defective survival motor neuron gene, and how the child ends up getting spinal muscular atrophy. Alrighty, we shall see you for lesson number 3. Remember, lesson number 1 was what is spinal muscular atrophy. Lesson number 2, we have covered the hereditary bit of it, that is the gene bit of it, and how the gene produces defective protein that do not give the motor neuron nutrition, and the muscle does not get communication, right? So it atrophies. Okay, we together so far? Alrighty, we'll see you for lesson number 3, on where we go deeper on how 2 parents end up with a child with spinal muscular atrophy. See you then. Good humans, bye-bye.